Imagine giving up your entire career for love, only to be publicly humiliated and kicked out of your millionaire husband's mansion, just because you didn't give him a son. At her baby shower, his mistress shows up, live streaming the scandal to millions, laughing as the perfect wife's life falls apart. But what she didn't know was that the wife's estranged father is one of the most powerful CEOs in America. And when he finds out what they did to his daughter, he decides to burn their entire empire to the ground. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate redemption, where money, pride, and power collide. Stay till the end. You won't believe who wins when justice finally arrives. And hey, if you love dramatic stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping tales every week. The Sterling Manor Gardens had never looked more magnificent. 200 guests mingled beneath strings of twinkling lights, their laughter floating across manicured lawns that stretched toward the Connecticut horizon. Pink roses adorned every table, pink ribbons wrapped every chair, and pink champagne flowed like water from a crystal fountain centerpiece. Madison Brooks stood at the edge of it all, one hand resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly. At 35, she still turned heads with her natural grace, though tonight exhaustion shadowed her hazel eyes. She watched the celebration, her celebration, with growing unease. "Darling, you really should sit," her husband Christopher murmured, appearing at her elbow with practiced concern. "Mother specifically arranged the throne chair for you, Mum." Madison glanced at the elaborate chair positioned at the head table. It looked more like a witness stand than a seat of honor. "I'm fine standing, Chris." He shifted uncomfortably, his sterling family signet ring catching the light as he adjusted his tie. At 38, Christopher Sterling possessed the kind of classical good looks that graced country club brochures. Sandy hair, blue eyes, and a jawline that suggested strength his character had never quite delivered. "Mother's about to give her speech," he said. "She's been preparing it for weeks." As if summoned by her son's words, Victoria Sterling swept toward the microphone. At 62, she commanded attention like a general reviewing troops. Her silver hair formed a perfect chignon, her Chanel suit pressed to military precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice rang out, silencing conversations instantly. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate the impending arrival of the next Sterling heir." Madison felt her stomach tighten, and not from the baby's movement. Victoria continued, her southern accent adding steel to honey. "For 2 centuries, Sterling men have built empires. From my great-great-grandfather, who founded our first store with nothing but determination, to my late husband, who expanded us nationwide, to my Christopher, who will carry that torch forward." She paused, scanning the crowd. "My son deserves an heir worthy of that legacy, a son to continue what generations of Sterling men have built." The emphasis on son landed like a slap. Madison's hand found her belly again, where her daughter turned restlessly. "To the future Sterling heir," Victoria raised her glass, "may he carry forward our proud traditions." The crowd echoed the toast, though Madison noticed several women exchanging uncomfortable glances. She didn't lift her own glass of sparkling cider. "Mrs. Sterling," a voice called out, "what if it's a girl?" The speaker stepped from behind a cluster of guests, a young woman Madison had never seen before. She looked barely 27, with the kind of Instagram-perfect features that suggested careful curation rather than natural beauty. Her red dress clung to curves that drew every male eye in attendance. Victoria's smile tightened. "I'm certain my son will eventually provide the heir our family requires." "Oh, he already has," the woman said brightly. She raised her own champagne glass. "Speaking of heirs, surprise! I'm carrying Christopher's son." The garden fell silent except for the splash of the fountain. The woman, who could she be, pulled out her phone and held it high, displaying an ultrasound image. "3 months along," she announced, and the doctor confirmed it's a bow. Madison's knees buckled. Chris caught her arm, but his touch felt mechanical, like he was following a script he'd already rehearsed. "Who are you?" Madison heard herself ask. "Jessica Monroe." The woman's smile widened as she began live streaming on her phone. "Chris's girlfriend." "Oops, did he forget to mention me?" She angled the camera toward Madison's stricken face. "When the wife can't deliver, literally, Christopher, Madison turned to her husband. What is she talking about? But Chris wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared at his shoes like a schoolboy caught cheating, which Madison realized with dawning horror he was. Victoria stepped forward, her expression triumphant. Miss Monroe has proven what you could not, Madison. She carries the sterling air. I'm pregnant with Chris's child, Madison said, voice shaking. Your grandchild. A girl, Victoria dismissed. Another disappointment in a long line of disappointments. You've failed the family bloodline. The guests had formed a circle now, some filming with their phones, others whispering behind raised hands. Madison recognized reporters from the society pages among them. This wasn't just a baby shower, it was an ambush. Jessica sauntered closer, her movements calculated for the cameras. Don't worry, Madison, I'll take good care of Chris, and the house, and the family legacy. She made a show of examining Madison's pink maternity dress. Though we'll definitely need to redecorate. All this pink is so basic. Chris, Madison grabbed her husband's arm. Say something. Tell them this is a mistake. Christopher Sterling, heir to a retail empire, master of boardrooms and business deals, stood silent. The party continued around them like a fever dream. Servers still circulated with pink frosted cupcakes. The string quartet still played Mozart. Guests still chatted and laughed, though their eyes kept sliding toward the drama at center stage. Madison found herself guided, herded really, toward the house by Christopher's firm grip on her elbow. Behind them, Victoria orchestrated the scene like a director, positioning Jessica in Madison's vacant spot at the head table. Smile for the cameras, dear, Victoria told Jessica. The society pages will want photos of the future Mrs. Sterling. The words chased Madison into the house. The Sterling Manor's interior matched its exterior grandeur. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings of stern-faced Sterling patriarchs watching from gilded frames. Madison had spent 3 years trying to feel at home here. Now the walls seemed to close in. Chris led her to his study, shutting the heavy door against the party noise. For a moment they stood in silence among leather-bound books and hunting trophies, all inherited, Madison knew, like everything else in Christopher's life. How long? She finally asked. Chris moved to the whiskey decanter, his hands shaking slightly as he poured. Madison, how long have you been sleeping with her? 6 months. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. Mother introduced us at the charity gala, said Jessica understood our world, our expectations. Our expectations? Madison's voice rose. I'm carrying your child, Chris. Doesn't that mean anything? Mother controls everything. The words tumbled out, the same excuse he'd used for 3 years. The money, the company, the board positions. If I don't give her what she wants, a son, an heir, Chris poured another drink, someone to carry on the Sterling name. Our daughter could, Mother will never accept that. He finally met her eyes, and Madison saw the truth there. Not regret, relief. I have no choice, Madison. You always have a choice. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're just too weak to make it. The study door burst open. Jessica sauntered in, already appraising the room with proprietary interest. Ooh, this is nice, she cooed, running her fingers along Chris's desk. But so dark and masculine. I'm thinking we paint it white, maybe add some mirrors. She glanced at Madison with mock sympathy. The designer says we can turn the nursery into my glam room. I'll need space for filming my content, My daughter's nursery, Madison started, won't be needed. Victoria appeared in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards Madison recognized from the estate staff. Gentlemen, please help Mrs. Sterling collect her personal belongings. She'll be leaving immediately. Victoria, please. That's Mrs. Sterling to you. The older woman's voice could have cut glass, though not for much longer. Christopher's lawyers will be in touch regarding the divorce proceedings. The security guards moved forward. Madison looked desperately at her husband, but Chris had turned to stare out the window, shoulders rigid. I'll pack myself, Madison said, salvaging what dignity she could. 5 minutes, Victoria decreed, and only your clothes and personal items. The jewelry stays, of course. It belongs to the Sterling family. Madison climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, the guards following at a discreet distance. In the master bedroom, master bedroom, her bedroom for 3 years, she grabbed a suitcase and began throwing in clothes. Her hands shook as she folded her favorite sweater, the one Chris had bought her on their honeymoon in Paris. From the window, she could see the party continuing below. Jessica held court at the head table, one hand resting theatrically on her still flat stomach, while Victoria introduced her to the Sterling family friends. The betrayal had been planned, orchestrated, executed with surgical precision. "Ma'am," one guard said gently, "time's up." Madison zipped the suitcase. On the dresser sat her jewelry box, the Sterling family heirlooms, yes, but also pieces from her own life before. She reached for a simple gold necklace, a gift from her father years ago. "All jewelry remains," the second guard said less gently. "This was mine before." Mrs. Sterling's orders were clear. Madison left the necklace, left the photos, left 3 years of trying to build a life in a family that had never wanted her. At the front door, Victoria waited with a manila envelope. "Your car keys," she said crisply. "The Mercedes belongs to the estate, naturally. Your personal vehicle is in the side lot. We've had your credit cards canceled. No point in prolonging the inevitable. Your phone will be disconnected at midnight." "I have nothing," Madison said. "No money, no home." "You have what you came with," Victoria smiled coldly. "Nothing, though I suppose you have that." She gestured dismissively at Madison's pregnant belly. "Perhaps next time you'll choose a family that values daughters." The massive door closed with a sound like a coffin sealing. Madison stood on the doorstep of the Sterling Manor, suitcase in hand, listening to laughter drift from the garden. Her beat-up Honda Civic waited in the side lot, the car Chris had always been embarrassed by, the one he'd insisted she park out of sight when they hosted guests. She drove away on autopilot, muscle memory navigating the winding Connecticut roads. It wasn't until she reached the gas station at the highway entrance that reality struck. "Card declined," the teenage attendant said, not unkindly. Madison tried another card, then another. All declined. "I can try to put $5 on pump 3, the attendant offered. "Sometimes the system—" "No," Madison stared at the gas gauge. "Quarter tank." "Thank you, but no." She parked at the edge of the lot and sat in gathering darkness. Her phone showed 17 missed calls, all from numbers she didn't recognize. Probably reporters. The Sterling scandal would be trending within hours. At 11:59, she watched her phone screen. At exactly midnight, the signal bars disappeared. "No service," blinked mockingly. Madison drove until the gas gauge hovered near empty, finally pulling into a truck stop. The parking lot was full of semis, their running lights creating pools of red in the darkness. She found a spot between two trucks, hidden from casual view, and reclined her seat as far as her belly would allow. Sleep wouldn't come. The baby moved restlessly, responding to her mother's distress. Madison rubbed her belly, humming softly, the same lullaby her own mother had sung years ago before cancer stole her away. A cramp seized her abdomen. Then another. "No," Madison whispered. "Please, not now. Not here." The cramping eased, but fear remained. She needed help, needed a hospital, needed— A trucker had left his phone on his dashboard, visible through his window. Madison knocked hesitantly. "You okay, miss?" The driver was grandfatherly, concerned. "I'm sorry to bother you. Could I possibly make one quick call? It's an emergency." He handed her the phone without hesitation. "Take your time." Madison's fingers hovered over the keypad. She knew the number by heart, had dialed it 1,000 times in her mind over the past 3 years. But pride had always stopped her. Pride in the promise she'd made when she chose Chris over her father's warnings. "He's not good enough for you," David Brooks had said. "That family will eat you alive." She'd been so certain her father was wrong, so determined to prove she could build her own life, make her own choices. The phone grew heavy in her hand. She handed it back. "Changed my mind," she said. "But thank you." "You sure you're okay?" The trucker studied her with worried eyes. "There's a hospital about 10 miles up the road." "I'm fine." The lie came automatically. "Just tired." Madison returned to her car and locked the doors. Outside, the highway hummed with late-night traffic. Inside, she wrapped her arms around her belly and finally let the tears fall. She'd lost everything. Her home, her marriage, her dignity. But as her daughter shifted inside her, Madison made a promise. "We'll be okay," she whispered. "Somehow we'll be okay." Dawn was still hours away, but Madison Brooks, soon to be Madison Brooks again, stripped of the sterling name, began planning her survival. 3 days passed in a blur of truck stops and rest areas. Madison had stretched her remaining cash, $43 from her purse, as far as possible. Gas station coffee for breakfast, vending machine crackers for lunch, nothing for dinner. The hunger was manageable, but the worry about her baby was not. She'd parked behind a warehouse in Newark, New Jersey, trying to decide whether to risk the emergency room. Without insurance, without identification that wouldn't lead back to the Sterlings, she felt trapped. The cramping had stopped, but exhaustion made her dizzy. A tap on the window jolted her from half-sleep. Madison's heart hammered as she looked up, expecting police or security guards. Instead, she saw a face that made her breath catch. David Brooks stood beside her car, his expression unreadable in the gray morning light. "3 years of silence," he said when she finally rolled down the window. "And this is how I find my daughter?" Madison's throat closed. He looked older. Silver now dominated the dark hair she remembered, and new lines creased his face. But his eyes, the same hazel as hers, held the steady strength that had once made her feel invincible. "How did you—" she started. "I'm in cybersecurity, Madison. I've been watching, waiting for you to need me." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. She should have been angry at the invasion of privacy, should have felt indignant that he'd been monitoring her. Instead, she felt only relief so profound it broke her remaining composure. "Dad," she whispered. He yanked open the car door and pulled her into his arms. Madison collapsed against him, sobbing with the abandon of a child who'd finally found safety. He smelled the same, cologne and coffee and something indefinable that meant father. "My car's over there," David said when her sobs quieted. "My driver will handle yours." "I can drive." "You can barely stand." His tone brooked no argument. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Madison couldn't remember. David's Bentley waited nearby, engine purring. The leather seats felt like clouds after 3 nights in her Civic. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Hollow cheeks, tangled hair, clothes she'd worn for days. "Straight to the hospital," David told his driver, then activated the privacy screen. "I'm okay. My pregnant daughter has been living in her car for 3 days. You are decidedly not okay." He pulled out his phone. "Dr. Reese? David Brooks, I need you at Mount Sinai in 20 minutes. My daughter, yes, the obstetrics chief." Madison closed her eyes, letting her father take control. She'd fought so hard to prove she didn't need him, didn't need his money or influence. Pride seemed like such a stupid luxury now. The hospital was a blur of private rooms and gentle hands. Dr. Reese, a woman with kind eyes and skilled fingers, examined Madison thoroughly while David paced outside. "The baby's fine," Dr. Reese announced. "Strong heartbeat, good movement, but you're dehydrated, malnourished, and your blood pressure is concerning. I want you on bed rest for at least a week." "I don't have anywhere to—" "You'll stay with me," David said from the doorway. No arguments. The drive to David's Manhattan penthouse took 40 minutes. Madison dozed fitfully, waking when they entered an underground garage. The private elevator opened directly into his apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park, minimalist furniture that screamed expensive taste. "Your room's ready," David said, leading her down a hallway. "I had Nancy prepare it when I got word about what happened." The guest room was twice the size of her Honda Civic, with an ensuite bathroom and a view of the city skyline. Fresh flowers sat on the nightstand. Maternity clothes hung in the closet, tags still attached. "You knew I'd come here." "I hoped." David sat on the edge of the bed while Madison showered and changed. When she emerged feeling human again, he was still there, waiting, like he'd been waiting for 3 years. "Tell me everything," he said. So Madison did. The slow erosion of her marriage, Victoria's constant disapproval, the pressure for a male heir, Christopher's weakness, the baby shower ambush, Jessica's cruelty, her humiliating ejection. David listened in silence, his face growing stonier with each detail. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "They did this to my daughter," he said quietly. "To my granddaughter. Dad, I just want to move on. Start fresh somewhere. They humiliated you." He turned and Madison saw something dangerous in his eyes. "Publicly, deliberately, they threw you out like trash while that woman live-streamed your pain for entertainment." "The videos," Madison whispered. "Have they?" David's jaw tightened. 5 million views and climbing. Replacing a basic wife 101 is trending. Madison pulled her knees to her chest or tried to around her belly. "Everyone's seen it. Everyone knows. Everyone's about to know a lot more." David pulled out his phone. "Natalie, clear my calendar for the next month." "Yes, everything. And convene the team. Full resources." "Dad, what are you doing?" "What I should have done 3 years ago." He sat beside her again. "Protected my daughter. I don't want revenge. Not revenge. Justice." David took her hand. "They think you have no one. They think you're powerless. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Madison wanted to protest, to insist she could handle this alone. But the truth was she couldn't. She had no money, no home, no resources. Her daughter deserved better than a mother who slept in cars and lived on vending machine food. "There's something else," she said quietly. "The family lawyer called before they cut my phone. The prenup means nothing. Contracts signed under duress are voidable. You don't understand. Victoria had me sign it the morning of the wedding. Said if I didn't, she'd cancel everything. I thought, you thought Christopher would protect you." David's voice held no judgment, only understanding. "Madison, I built a $3 billion company by knowing 3 things: how to read contracts, how to find weakness, and how to destroy enemies. The Sterlings are about to experience all 3. A knock interrupted them. Natalie Waters entered. David's COO and right hand, a woman Madison remembered as fiercely competent and unwaveringly loyal. "The team's assembled," Natalie reported. "Marcus is already pulling background. The forensic accountants are diving into Sterling Enterprises. Legal is reviewing the prenup and Connecticut divorce law." "Who's Marcus?" Madison asked. "Marcus Stone, ex-FBI, best private investigator on the East Coast." David stood. "Get some rest. You're safe now." But sleep wouldn't come easily. Madison lay in the luxurious bed, hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's movements. Outside, Manhattan pulsed with life. Inside, she felt suspended between her old life and whatever came next. Her phone, a new one David had provided, buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Madison?" The voice was hesitant, young. "This is Jessica. Jessica Monroe. Please don't hang up." Madison sat up. "What do you want?" "To meet, just us. There are things you need to know." "You destroyed my life on social media. Why would I?" "Because I'm not the enemy you think I am." Jessica's voice dropped. "And because we're both victims of Victoria Sterling. Meet me tomorrow, please." The line went dead. Madison stared at the phone, then at the city lights beyond her window. In the distance, a siren wailed. Someone else's emergency, someone else's crisis. She thought about Christopher, probably sleeping peacefully in their marriage bed while Jessica occupied the guest room. Thought about Victoria, satisfied that her plan had worked perfectly. Thought about her daughter, who would enter a world where her own father had discarded her for being female. Madison Brooks had lost everything. But as she drifted towards sleep in her father's protection, she realized something had shifted. She wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding. The Sterlings had made a calculation that a discarded wife would disappear quietly, too broken and ashamed to fight back. They'd calculated wrong, because Madison Brooks had something they'd never expected. She had a father who commanded billions and held grudges. She had a team assembling to dismantle their empire, and she had a daughter to fight for. The war was just beginning. The war room occupied an entire floor of the Nexus security building. Madison had never seen her father's company in full operational mode. She'd left for college just as he was building his empire, and their estrangement had kept her away during his rise to power. Now she understood why David Brooks was worth billions. Screens covered every wall, displaying financial records, social media feeds, and surveillance footage. A dozen specialists worked with quiet efficiency, their keyboards clicking in rhythmic harmony. At the center stood Marcus Stone, the private investigator her father had mentioned. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus greeted her. "Or do you prefer Ms. Brooks?" "Brooks," Madison said firmly. "Always Brooks now." Marcus nodded approvingly. He looked exactly like what an ex-FBI agent should. Steel gray hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of presence that made guilty people confess without prompting. "Your father asked me to brief you on our findings," he said, gesturing to a conference room. "Some of it may be difficult to hear." Madison followed him, noting how her father's employees nodded respectfully as she passed. Word had spread, the boss's daughter was back, and the full weight of Nexus security was behind her. In the conference room, Marcus activated a wall display. Christopher's face appeared, a society page photo from happier times. "Christopher Sterling," Marcus began, "heir to Sterling Enterprises, a retail empire valued at $800 million. Or rather, that's what they want people to think." He clicked to the next slide. Financial records filled the screen. "The reality is different. Sterling Enterprises has been hemorrhaging money for 5 years. They're over-leveraged, underwater on most of their properties, and facing multiple lawsuits for environmental violations." Madison studied the numbers. But Victoria always talked about their wealth, their legacy. "Smoke and mirrors." Marcus pulled up more documents. "They've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, shuffling debt between subsidiaries. Your mother-in-law is brilliant at maintaining appearances, but the foundation is crumbling." "What about Chris?" Marcus's expression darkened. "This is where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean criminal." A new set of records appeared. Casino receipts, wire transfers, photos of Chris at underground gambling establishments. "Your husband has a problem," Marcus said. "A $2 million problem. He's been embezzling from the company to cover gambling debts. Small amounts at first, but it's escalated dramatically in the past year." Madison sank into a chair. "Victoria must not know." "Oh, she knows him. Oh, she..." Marcus showed security footage from Sterling corporate headquarters. "This is from 3 months ago. Victoria meeting with their CFO, reviewing the same records we obtained. She's been covering for him, moving money to hide the theft. Oui, because admitting her son is a criminal would destroy the Sterling reputation. And reputation is all they have left." David entered the room, Natalie at his side. "Show her the rest." Marcus hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should..." "Show her," David repeated. "She needs to know everything." The screen changed again. Now it showed Jessica Monroe's social media profiles, but also something else. Medical records, financial statements, text messages. "Jessica Monroe," Marcus said, 27, Instagram influencer, 800,000 followers. Born Jessica Kowalski in Detroit. Abandoned by her mother at age 7, bounced through 12 foster homes. Madison felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy. "She's reinvented herself multiple times," Marcus continued. "Different names, different cities, always the same pattern. Targets wealthy men, claims pregnancy, extracts settlements. This is her 4th time." "4th?" Madison stared at the screen. "But she's pregnant." "Oh, she's definitely pregnant. The question is by whom?" Marcus pulled up a DNA testing facility record. "She was here 2 weeks ago. Paternity test. We're working on getting the results." Natalie stepped forward. "There's more. The environmental lawsuits against Sterling Enterprises, they're not frivolous. 5 of their flagship stores are built on contaminated land. The cleanup costs alone could bankrupt them." "Victoria knew?" Madison asked. "She orchestrated the purchases through shell companies," Natalie confirmed, "then had the environmental reports buried. We have copies of everything." Madison's phone buzzed. Jessica again, with an address, a coffee shop in Midtown. "I have to go," Madison said. "Absolutely not," David protested. "It could be a trap." "She's pregnant and desperate," Madison countered. "Just like me. I'll be fine." Marcus stood. "I'll have surveillance on you. Any sign of trouble, we intervene." An hour later, Madison entered the coffee shop. Jessica sat in a corner booth, and Madison almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the Instagram-perfect styling. This Jessica wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer dress replaced with jeans and a sweater. "You came," Jessica said, gesturing to the opposite seat. Madison sat carefully, her pregnancy making booth navigation awkward. They studied each other, the wife and the mistress, both carrying sterling children, both pawns in Victoria's game. "Why am I here?" Madison asked. Jessica's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "Because I'm scared. Because Victoria Sterling is a monster. And because what she did to you, she's planning to do to me. You helped her, I know." Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks, and Madison realized they were genuine. "I told myself it was different, that Chris loved me, that I'd finally found my place. But it's all lies, isn't it?" Madison said nothing, waiting. "She approached me 6 months ago," Jessica continued, "at a charity gala, said her son was trapped in a loveless marriage, that you'd refused to give him children. I was stupid enough to believe her. Chris told me the same story." Jessica laughed bitterly. "Chris tells everyone what they want to hear. Do you know what he said when I told him I was pregnant? 'Mother will handle it, like I'm a problem to be managed.'" She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a message thread. "Look," Madison read the text between Chris and someone labeled V. "V, is it done?" "C, she's pregnant, boy confirmed." "V, good. 6 months after the divorce, then we discard her." "C, what about the baby?" "V, we'll take him. She'll sign away rights for the right price." "Oh, C, and if she doesn't?" "V, then we do what we always do, destroy her." Madison pushed the phone back, nausea rolling through her that had nothing to do with pregnancy. "She's done this before?" "3 times, Jessica's voice was hollow. "I hired my own investigator after seeing those texts. 3 other women over the past 15 years, all pregnant with sterling sons, all paid off or run off. One committed suicide." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. Madison gripped the table edge. "There's something else," Jessica said. "The baby, it might not be Chris's." Madison waited. "I was seeing someone else when Victoria approached me. We'd broken up, but the timing—" Jessica shrugged helplessly. "I didn't know I was pregnant when I started seeing Chris. When I found out, I assumed, hoped it was his. Victoria was so happy about the boy, and I needed the security." "Have you done a paternity test?" 2 weeks ago, but the results go to a P.O. box Victoria controls. She'll know before I do." They sat in silence, 2 women caught in the same web. Finally, Madison asked the question that mattered most. "What do you want from me?" "Help," Jessica said simply. "Protection. A way out that doesn't end with me destroyed or dead." She reached into her purse, pulling out a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Recordings of Victoria planning your takedown. Financial records showing Chris's embezzlement. Details about the other women. I've been collecting it all. Insurance for when they turn on me." Madison took the drive. "Why trust me?" "Because you're the only person who understands. And because—" Jessica's hand went to her belly. "Because whether this baby is Chris's or not, he doesn't deserve what Victoria has planned. No child does." "My father's investigating them," Madison said carefully. "If you testify, I'll do anything." Jessica leaned forward urgently. "I know you hate me. I destroyed your life, broadcast your humiliation. But I'm 27, pregnant, and terrified. I've made terrible choices, but I don't want to die for them." Madison thought about her own daughter, safe inside her, for now. Thought about Jessica's unborn child, innocent of his mother's schemes. Thought about the other women Victoria had destroyed, the children torn from their mothers. "Give me your phone number," Madison said. "Your real one, not whatever you use for Instagram. My father's lawyer will call you." Relief transformed Jessica's face. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve—" "You're right. You don't." Madison stood carefully. "But your baby does. And maybe that's enough." Outside the coffee shop, Madison spotted one of Marcus's team, a woman reading a newspaper who'd been there when she arrived. The surveillance was subtle but comforting. Her new phone rang. "David." "I'm fine," she said before he could ask. "And we need to adjust our strategy. This is bigger than just my divorce." "How much bigger?" Madison thought about 3 women destroyed, children stolen, a pattern of cruelty spanning decades. Big enough to bring down the entire Sterling Empire, she said, and Victoria Sterling with it. As her father's car arrived to collect her, Madison felt the shape of the war changing. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman Victoria had crushed, every child she'd weaponized, every life she'd destroyed in service to her twisted legacy. The Sterlings thought they were protecting their empire. They had no idea they had already lit the fuse that would burn it all down. The law offices of Pearson, Hardman, and Sterling occupied 3 floors of a Manhattan high-rise, all marble and intimidation. Madison sat between her father and his lead attorney, feeling like David facing Goliath despite her own team's impressive credentials. Across the gleaming conference table, Christopher fidgeted while Victoria sat ramrod straight, flanked by a phalanx of lawyers who looked like they ate broken marriages for breakfast. "Shall we begin?" Victoria's lead counsel, Harrison Pike, opened a leather portfolio with theatrical precision. "This should be quite straightforward." Madison's attorney, Helen Campbell, who also happened to be her godmother, smiled thinly. "Indeed, my client is entitled to significant assets under New York equitable distribution law." "Your client signed a prenuptial agreement," Pike countered, "under duress, the morning of the wedding, with no independent counsel present." Helen's voice could have a frozen hellfire. "The document is unconscionable and void." Victoria laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Unconscionable? Your client lived in luxury for 3 years, contributed nothing, and failed in her one duty." "Her one duty?" Helen raised an eyebrow. "Providing an heir," Victoria said coldly. "She's 7 months pregnant," David interjected, his control visibly fraying. "With a girl." Victoria dismissed the unborn child with a wave. Worthless to the Sterling legacy. Madison felt her father tense beside her. She placed a calming hand on his arm. Pike cleared his throat. "Regardless of the prenup's validity, we have concerns about Mrs. Sterling's fitness as a parent." "Excuse me?" Helen leaned forward. "We have evidence of erratic behavior, threats, and instability." Pike produced an iPad, swiping to a video. Madison's own face appeared on screen, twisted with rage. Her voice, but wrong, threatening Christopher, promising to destroy his family, screaming about revenge. The restaurant setting looked familiar, but she'd never been there with Chris. "That's not real," Madison gasped. "Deepfake technology," Marcus murmured from behind her. He'd insisted on attending, standing guard like a sentinel. Sophisticated work. Pike played 3 more videos. Madison apparently drunk at a charity function she'd never attended. Madison allegedly pushing Jessica at the baby shower, though she'd been across the garden. Madison seemingly admitting to mental health issues that didn't exist. "Your client appears unstable," Pike said smoothly. "We have witness statements corroborating these incidents." Helen laughed. "Deepfakes? Really? My experts will shred these in court." "Perhaps." Pike's smile was serpentine, "but the court of public opinion has already ruled." He gestured to his assistant, who distributed tablets showing social media feeds. The videos had millions of views. Comments called Madison psycho, bitter, dangerous. The hashtag #UnfitMotherMadison was trending. "You leaked these?" David's voice was dangerously quiet. "We simply shared concerning evidence with relevant parties," Pike replied. "You shared doctored videos to destroy my daughter's reputation." "Dad," Madison squeezed his arm. To Pike, she said, "What do you want?" Victoria took over. "Full custody of any Sterling heir. You sign away all parental rights. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges for your threatening behavior." "Criminal charges based on fake videos?" "Prove they're fake." Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "In the meantime, your reputation is ruined. No court will give you custody after seeing these. No employer will hire you. No decent man will date you." Madison felt the trap closing. They'd planned this meticulously. Create false evidence, destroy her publicly, then offer a deal that seemed like mercy. "We need a recess," Helen said. "Take all the time you need," Pike agreed. "Though I should mention, every hour you delay, more content gets released. We have quite a collection." In the private conference room, Madison collapsed into a chair. They're going to destroy me completely. Let them try, David said grimly. Marcus? The investigator was already on his phone. My tech team is analyzing the deepfakes. We'll prove they're fabricated, but it'll take time. Time we don't have, Helen added. If they keep releasing videos, Madison, Natalie entered, iPad in hand. You need to see this. The screen showed a live Instagram feed. Jessica Monroe, in full makeup and designer clothes, addressing her followers. I have to share something painful, Jessica said, tears streaming perfectly down her contoured cheeks. Madison Sterling attacked me at the baby shower. She's been harassing me, threatening my unborn child. I'm scared for my safety. Comments poured in supporting Jessica, condemning Madison. The narrative was being cemented in real time. She's supposed to be helping us, Madison said numbly. Or she's playing both sides. Marcus's expression was grim. We need to reassess. Madison's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Don't answer, David started, but Madison had already swiped. Having fun yet? Jessica's voice was different, harder, mocking. Victoria promised me an extra $1 million for that performance. Oscar-worthy, and don't you think? You said you were scared of her. I am, but I'm more scared of being poor. Jessica laughed. Did you really think I'd turn on the Sterlings? They're my meal ticket. You're just the roadblock. The line went dead. Madison stared at the phone, feeling the last piece of hope crumble. They'd anticipated everything, planned for every move. We go back in there, Helen said firmly. We don't agree to anything. Make them take us to court, where they'll present deep fakes and lying witnesses to a judge who's probably golfing buddies with Victoria? Madison shook her head. They've won. No. David stood, power radiating from every line of his body. They've overplayed their hand. They just don't know it yet. Back in the main conference room, Pike was practically glowing. Have we reached a decision? We have, Madison said, surprising everyone. I'll sign. Madison, no, Helen protested. On one condition. Madison looked directly at Victoria. I want to hear you say it. All of it. What you did, what you planned, how you destroyed those other women. I want to hear the truth before I sign my daughter away. Victoria studied her for a long moment. Clear the room. Just family. The lawyers filed out, leaving only Madison, Christopher, Victoria, and, at Madison's insistence, her father. You want the truth? Victoria leaned back, queen of her domain. Very well. You were never supposed to last 3 years. Christopher was meant to discard you after 6 months, but you got your claws in deep. I loved him, Madison said quietly. Love. Victoria spat the word. Love is for peasants. Marriage is about legacy, bloodlines, power. You were supposed to be a brief distraction while I found Christopher a suitable bride. So you found Jessica instead. Jessica is trash, Victoria said dismissively, but fertile trash who follows orders. She'll produce the heir, sign away rights, and disappear with her payoff, just like the others. How many others? 3, all handled efficiently. Victoria's eyes glittered. Though one did make things unnecessarily dramatic. Suicide is so messy. Christopher flinched. It was the first emotion he'd shown all day. You drove a woman to suicide? Madison couldn't hide her horror. She drove herself. I simply showed her the reality, that she'd never see her son again, never be part of his life. Some people can't handle truth. Madison's hand went to her belly. Her daughter kicked, as if sensing the evil in the room. And if I don't sign, Madison asked, then we destroy you utterly. The deepfakes are just the beginning. We'll have you declared mentally unfit. We'll ensure you never work again. We'll make you disappear one way or another. Victoria smiled. Though I'd prefer you sign. Cleaner that way. Get the papers, Madison said. Victoria snapped her fingers. Christopher, moving like an automaton, retrieved documents from his briefcase. Madison took the pen, hand hovering over the signature line. One more question. The other women, where are their sons now? Where they belong, with their father, learning to be sterling men. Do they know their mothers are dead or disappeared? They know their mothers were weak, Victoria said. That's all that matters. Madison nodded slowly. Then instead of signing, she set down the pen. Thank you, she said. Victoria frowned. For what? David smiled, the shark smile that had terrified boardrooms across the globe. For the confession, every word recorded, video and audio. Marcus has devices throughout this building. That's illegal, Victoria started. One-party consent state, Helen said, re-entering with the other lawyers. Madison consented. Everything you just said is admissible. And already uploaded to secure servers, Marcus added, appearing with his team. Along with evidence of the deepfake creation, Jessica's real communications, and records of payments to the other women. Victoria's face went white, then red. You set me up. You set yourself up, Madison stood carefully. I just gave you the rope. Christopher finally spoke, voice cracking. Mother, what have you done? What I've always done, Victoria snarled, protected our legacy from weak men and weaker women. You destroyed lives. I preserved our bloodline. Victoria rose, magnificent in her fury. For 2 centuries, sterling men built their empire on contaminated land, Natalie interrupted, entering with an armload of documents. EPA officials are raiding your properties as we speak. Environmental crimes, cover-ups, bribery of inspectors. It's all here. And here, another of David's team entered. IRS Criminal Division is very interested in 20 years of tax fraud. And here, Marcus produced more files. FBI has questions about interstate financial crimes. The sterling lawyers were backing away from their clients like rats fleeing a sinking ship. This is impossible, Victoria whispered. We own judges, politicians. You own them, David corrected. But money only buys loyalty until someone offers more, or until the FBI offers immunity for testimony. As if on cue, Harrison Pike cleared his throat. Mrs. Sterling, I'm afraid our firm can no longer represent you. Conflict of interest, you understand. One by one, the Sterling legal team filed out. Within minutes, only the family remained. Christopher looked at Madison with desperate eyes. I never wanted any of this. Mother said, stop. Madison felt exhausted rather than triumphant. Just stop. You made your choices. I loved you. You loved being weak more. She turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, Chris, I'm sorry. Sorry? That you never had the courage to be your own man. That you'll spend the rest of your life as your mother's puppet, even in prison. As they left the conference room, Madison heard Victoria's voice rising in fury, Christopher's weak protests, the sound of an empire beginning to crumble. In the elevator, David took her hand. You did well. I don't feel victorious, Madison admitted. Victory isn't always sweet, Helen said gently. Sometimes it's just survival. As they exited onto the Manhattan street, Madison's phone buzzed. Jessica again. You recorded me too, didn't you? Jessica's voice was small, frightened again. Every word. Madison confirmed. What happens to me now? Madison thought about justice versus mercy, revenge versus redemption. That depends on you, Jessica, but I'd suggest you find a very good lawyer and maybe some actual integrity. She hung up and leaned against her father. Around them, New York churned on, indifferent to the drama of ruined lives and fallen empires. But Madison wasn't indifferent. In her belly, her daughter turned, and Madison whispered a promise. You'll never know this kind of cruelty, little one. Never. The war wasn't over. There would be trials, media circuses, the slow grind of justice. But the ambush had failed. The Sterlings had thought her defenseless. They'd forgotten that even wounded tigers have claws. The Sterling Empire didn't fall in a day. It collapsed like a controlled demolition. Each charge David Brooks had planted detonating with surgical precision. Madison watched from her father's penthouse as the first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. The CNN breaking news banner read, Sterling Enterprises raided by FBI, financial crimes suspected. They're arresting the CFO, Natalie reported from her phone. He's already offering to testify against Victoria. On screen, federal agents carried boxes from Sterling corporate headquarters, while reporters clustered like hungry wolves. Madison recognized several employees being led out in handcuffs. Victoria's inner circle, the ones who'd helped hide Christopher's embezzlement. Where are Victoria and Chris? Madison asked. Country Club, Marcus said, entering with fresh intelligence. Emergency board meeting. They're trying to mount a defense. David laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Let them try bees. Phase 2 launches in an hour. Phase 2 turned out to be environmental catastrophe. The EPA held a press conference announcing the discovery of toxic contamination at 5 Sterling flagship stores. The cleanup costs alone would bankrupt the company, but the criminal charges for knowingly building on poisoned land were what made headlines. Madison's phone lit up with messages from old friends, former Sterling company wives, expressing shock and subtle schadenfreude. She ignored them all except one, from Judge Helen Campbell, her godmother and attorney. Custody hearings scheduled for next week. Given recent developments, I'm optimistic. The thought of fighting Christopher for custody while he faced federal charges should have brought satisfaction. Instead, Madison felt hollow. On the sofa beside her, her belly rippled with her daughter's movements. "You okay?" David asked, joining her. "I'm watching my daughter's father get destroyed on national television," Madison said. "I should be celebrating, but I just feel empty. His destruction is his own doing. You're just revealing what was already there." "I know, but she'll grow up knowing her father was a criminal, that her grandmother was a monster. What kind of legacy is that?" David was quiet for a moment. Better than growing up as Victoria's pawn. Better than becoming another Sterling victim. The news switched to Wall Street, where Sterling Enterprises stock was in freefall. Trading had been halted twice already. Investors were fleeing like rats from a burning ship. "Mr. Brooks?" Marcus appeared in the doorway. "You need to see this." They gathered in David's home office, where Marcus had set up a secure feed. The screen showed Victoria Sterling being escorted from the country club in handcuffs. "IRS Criminal Division," Marcus explained. 20 years of tax fraud, plus the new embezzlement charges. They're holding her without bail as a flight risk. Christopher wasn't with her. Madison found herself searching the footage for his familiar form. "Where's Chris?" Still inside, Marcus pulled up another feed, a local news station. Barricaded in the club president's office. SWAT's on scene. Madison's blood turned cold, and he wouldn't... "We don't know what he'll do," David said grimly. "He's lost everything, his mother, his company, his future. Desperate men make desperate choices." "I need to go there," Madison said. "Absolutely not. Dad, stop." Madison stood with difficulty, her pregnancy making her ungainly. "Whatever else he is, Christopher is my child's father. If there's a chance I can talk him down..." "He threw you away," David reminded her harshly. "Chose his mother and that woman over you and your daughter." "I know what he chose, but I also know what I choose. And I choose not to let my daughter grow up knowing I could have saved her father and didn't try." The argument continued during the drive to Greenwich. David had insisted on coming, along with Marcus and a security detail. The country club was surrounded by police vehicles, their lights painting the manicured grounds in reds and blues. A detective tried to stop them at the perimeter, but Helen Campbell was already there, working her legal magic. Within minutes, Madison was on the phone with the crisis negotiator. "He's not responding to us," the negotiator admitted. "Hasn't made any demands. We're not even sure he's still conscious." "Let me talk to him," Madison said. "Ma'am, that's not protocol. His 7 months pregnant wife wants to talk to him," Helen interjected with steely authority. "Make it happen." They patched her through to the office phone. It rang 12 times before Christopher answered. "Madison?" His voice was thick, slurred, drinking probably. "Chris, it's me." "Did you come to gloat?" A bitter laugh. "Come to see the mighty Sterling heir reduced to nothing?" "I came because I was worried about you." Silence stretched between them, filled with years of accumulated hurt. "I loved you," Christopher said finally. "I need you to know that. Despite everything, I loved you." "I know," Madison lied, "because kindness costs nothing and might save everything. Mother said love was weakness, said it would destroy me." Another laugh, more broken than bitter. "Guess she was right." "Chris, you need to come out, face what's coming. It's the first brave thing you can do." "Brave?" His voice cracked. "I've never been brave. You said it yourself. I'm weak. Always have been." "Then change that right now. Walk out of there and face the consequences. Show your daughter that her father finally found courage." "A daughter I'll never know." Who'll grow up hearing what a failure I was? Madison closed her eyes, seeing two paths forward. One where she protected herself with righteous anger. Another where she offered something harder. Grace. She'll know her father made mistakes, Madison said carefully. But she'll also know he loved her enough to face punishment rather than take the coward's way out. That's the legacy you can still choose, Chris. More silence. Then, you'd tell her that? After everything? I'll tell her the truth, that her father was flawed but not evil, that he was trapped by his family's expectations, that in the end he tried to do right. I don't deserve that. No, Madison agreed. You don't, but she does. Through the windows of the mobile command unit, Madison could see movement at the club entrance. Christopher emerged, hands raised, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. Officers moved in, efficient but not rough. He didn't resist. As they led him to a patrol car, Christopher's eyes found Madison through the glass. She placed a hand on her belly, and he nodded once, acknowledgement, apology, and goodbye, all in one gesture. That was well done, Helen said quietly. Madison watched the patrol car disappear. He's still going to prison. Yes, but alive. Your daughter won't carry the weight of his suicide. They returned to Manhattan as evening fell. The news was in full feeding frenzy mode. Sterling collapse, arrests, the scandal of the century. Madison turned it all off, needing silence. But silence wouldn't come. Her phone rang, Jessica's number. What do you want? Madison answered, too tired for games. I'm at Mount Sinai. Jessica's voice was strained. I'm in labor. It's too early. I'm only 6 months, and I'm alone. And which room? What? Which room are you in, Jessica? Maternity ward, room 302. But why would you? Madison hung up and looked at her father. I need to go to the hospital. Madison, she's alone and terrified and in premature labor. I don't have to like her, Dad. I just have to be human. The hospital room smelled of fear and antiseptic. Jessica looked impossibly young, propped against white pillows. Her Instagram-perfect facade completely stripped away. Monitors beeped around her, tracking contractions and the baby's distressed heartbeat. You came, Jessica whispered. You called. Madison lowered herself into the bedside chair. Where's your family? What family? Tears leaked from Jessica's eyes. Foster kids don't get families. We get caseworkers and group homes and men who promise to save us. The baby's father, the real one, married, went back to his wife when I told him I was pregnant. Jessica grabbed Madison's hand as another contraction hit. I'm scared. What if the baby dies? What if this is punishment for what I did to you? Babies aren't punishment, Madison said firmly, and modern medicine is miraculous. They'll do everything they can. They sat through the night, two women who should have been enemies, bound by the universal terror of pregnancy gone wrong. Madison held Jessica's hand through contractions, coached her breathing, advocated with nurses. At dawn, Jessica's son arrived, 3 pounds, 2 ounces of fighting spirit. The NICU team whisked him away, but not before Madison saw his face. He looked nothing like Christopher. He's not a Sterling, Jessica said weakly. No, he's yours, just yours. Victoria will destroy me when she finds out. Victoria's in federal prison. She can't hurt anyone anymore. Jessica studied Madison with eyes that had seen too much too young. Why are you being kind to me? Because someone has to break the cycle, Madison said simply. All this cruelty, all this using children as weapons, someone has to say enough. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to be anything but what men want me to be. Then learn. Your son needs you to learn. Madison stayed until Jessica fell asleep, then made her way to her own obstetrics appointment. Dr. Reese proclaimed her healthy, the baby thriving despite the stress. You're at 32 weeks, Dr. Reese noted. Getting close. Have you thought about names? Madison had, in the quiet hours when sleep wouldn't come. Luna Catherine Brooks. Beautiful. And the father, will he be involved? No, Madison said quietly. Her father is going to prison. But she'll have my dad and me. That's enough. Leaving the hospital, Madison found her father waiting with the car. How's the girl? David asked. Terrified. Alone. Exactly where Victoria wanted her. You don't owe her anything, Madison. I know. Madison watched Manhattan blur past the window. But maybe that's exactly why I should help her. David was quiet for a long moment. Your mother would be proud of you, the grace you're showing. Mom always said the best revenge was a life well lived. Smart woman. David took her hand. Though I still prefer the systematic destruction of my enemies. Madison laughed, the first real laugh in weeks. We can do both, Dad. We can do both. As they pulled into the penthouse garage, Madison's phone lit up with news alerts. Christopher had been formally charged with embezzlement, facing up to 10 years. Victoria had been denied bail again after threatening the judge. Sterling Enterprises had filed for bankruptcy. The empire had fallen. The Sterlings were finished. But Madison's story was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Madison stood in a Manhattan courtroom for the custody hearing. The gallery was packed with reporters, but Judge Helen Campbell maintained strict order. This wasn't a criminal trial, just a family court matter, but the Sterling name made everything newsworthy. Christopher appeared via video link from Rikers Island, where he awaited trial. He looked haggard in his orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the polished heir who'd once graced society pages. Mr. Sterling, Judge Campbell began, her godmotherly warmth replaced by judicial steel. You're seeking joint custody of the unborn child, correct? Christopher's lawyer, a public defender since Sterling assets were frozen, spoke up. My client believes he can be an active father despite his current circumstances. From federal prison, Helen interjected, he's facing 10 years minimum. People parent from prison, the defender argued weakly. People who didn't throw their pregnant wives onto the street typically have better cases, Helen countered. Madison watched Christopher on the screen. He couldn't meet her eyes, staring instead at his shackled hands. Judge Campbell reviewed the files. I see multiple instances of abandonment, emotional abuse, and financial manipulation. Not to mention Mr. Sterling is currently under investigation for embezzlement and facing serious federal charges. Your Honor, Christopher spoke suddenly, his voice tinny through the connection. May I address the court? Proceed? Christopher finally looked at Madison through the camera. I withdraw my petition for custody. I can't be a father from prison. I can't give Luna anything but shame and stigma. Madison will be a good mother, better than I could ever be as a father. The public defender looked stunned. Mr. Sterling, we discussed. It's done, Christopher said flatly. I won't contest anything. Give Madison whatever she wants. Judge Campbell nodded slowly. Mr. Sterling, do you understand you're voluntarily terminating your parental rights? I understand. His voice cracked. Tell Luna. Tell her I'm sorry. The screen went black. Madison felt an unexpected sting of tears, not for the Christopher who had betrayed her, but for the man he might have been in a different life. Well, Judge Campbell said, that simplifies matters. Mrs. Brooks, you'll have sole custody. Any questions? Madison shook her head, one hand on her belly where Luna seemed unusually still, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Helen and David's security team formed a protective barrier, but one question pierced through. Madison, what's your response to Victoria Sterling's interview? Madison froze. What interview? Helen grabbed a tablet from an assistant, her face darkening as she read. That woman gave a jailhouse interview to Vanity Fair. It published this morning. In the car, Madison read Victoria's words with growing disgust. The Sterling matriarch painted herself as a victim, a mother protecting her family legacy, persecuted for maintaining standards. She called Madison a gold digger, Jessica an opportunist, and claimed the entire investigation was a witch hunt. She shows no remorse, Madison said. Sociopaths rarely do, David replied, but public opinion is firmly against her. The interview is being torn apart online. Indeed, by evening, Victoria's attempt at reputation rehabilitation had backfired spectacularly. Survivor testimonies from the 3 previous women flooded social media. One had kept recordings, another had photos of bruises from when she tried to see her son. The third, the one who'd taken her own life, had left a video message that her sister finally released. Madison couldn't watch that one. The pain in the woman's eyes was too familiar. Instead, she focused on the future. With Helen's help, she established the Luna Foundation, a nonprofit supporting women escaping abusive relationships, particularly those involving custody battles. David pledged 10 million in seed funding. You sure about this? He asked over dinner. You could just move on, focus on your daughter. Luna needs to grow up, seeing her mother help others, Madison said. That's the legacy I want to build. A knock interrupted them. Marcus entered, expression grim. We have a problem. Jessica Monroe is missing. Madison's blood chilled. Missing how? She was discharged from the hospital yesterday, never made it to the shelter we arranged. Her phone's off, social media dark. Marcus paused. There's more. Someone matching Victoria's description was seen near the hospital the day before. Victoria's in federal custody. She made bail this morning. Anonymous donor posted 10 million. Madison and David exchanged looks. Victoria out and Jessica missing wasn't coincidence. Find her, David ordered. Already on it. But Madison, Marcus hesitated. Jessica withdrew 50,000 from an account yesterday. It looks like she ran. Or was paid to run, Helen said, joining them. Victoria's still pulling strings, even from jail. Madison thought about Jessica's terror in the hospital, her desperate need for security. 50,000 would seem like salvation to a girl who'd grown up with nothing. She took her baby? Madison asked. Hospital says she left with the infant against medical advice. Marcus pulled up security footage. But look at her face. Jessica looked terrified in the grainy video, clutching her premature son while glancing constantly over her shoulder. She's not running by choice, Madison said. She's being chased. The next 48 hours were a blur of investigation. Marcus's team tracked Jessica's movements through traffic cameras and credit card usage. She was heading south, stopping only for gas and baby supplies. Meanwhile, Victoria's lawyer had filed an emergency motion claiming grandparental rights to Jessica's baby based on Christopher's presumed paternity. She's trying to steal another child, Helen said, disgusted. Even facing federal charges, she won't stop. Madison made a decision. I'm going after Jessica. Absolutely not, David protested. You're 35 weeks pregnant, and Jessica is alone with a premature infant, being hunted by a woman who's destroyed every mother who crossed her path. Madison stood carefully. I know what it's like to run scared. I can reach her in ways your investigators can't. The argument was fierce but brief. In the end, David's protective instincts lost to Madison's determination. Within hours, she was in an SUV with Marcus and 2 security specialists, heading south on I-95. They caught up with Jessica at a rundown motel in North Carolina. Madison approached the room alone, despite Marcus's protests. Jessica? She knocked softly. It's Madison, I'm alone. Silence, then the sound of a baby crying. Please, Jessica, I know you're scared. I know Victoria got to you, but running won't solve this. The door cracked open, revealing Jessica's tear-stained face. She said she'd take him. Said she'd prove he was Christopher's and take him away. Can I come in? The motel room was depressing, water-stained ceiling, musty carpet, and Jessica's few possessions scattered around. The baby lay in a cardboard box lined with towels, too small for even the cheap portable crib in the corner. He needs medical care, Madison said gently. Premature babies require monitoring. I know, Jessica snapped, then crumbled. I know, but Victoria had people at the hospital. They tried to serve me papers, said I was an unfit mother, that the Sterling family deserved custody. Victoria has no claim on your son. He's not Christopher's. She doesn't care. She said she'd make the test say whatever she wanted. Said she'd destroy Mimi like the others. Jessica picked up her son with shaking hands. I can't lose him. He's all I have. Madison sat on the threadbare bedspread, her own pregnancy making her awkward. You don't have to run, Jessica. We can protect you. Like you protected yourself? You had to hide in a car. Because I was alone, you're not. Madison met her eyes. I know you betrayed me. I know you chose their money over truth, but your son doesn't deserve to pay for that. Let us help you. Jessica looked at her baby, so tiny, so fragile, fighting for every breath. What would you do if someone threatened Luna? Anything, Madison admitted, which is why I'm here. Mother to mother, Jessica. Let me help you fight her the right way. It took another hour of gentle persuasion, but finally Jessica agreed to return. Marcus arranged for a medical transport. The baby needed NICU care urgently. During the drive back, Jessica told her story in full. The foster homes that taught her beauty was currency, the men who'd used and discarded her, the desperate need for security that made Victoria's offer irresistible. I told myself I was different from the others, Jessica said, that I was smarter, prettier, more careful. But I was just another disposable woman to them. Not anymore, Madison said firmly. Your son makes you unforgettable, unmovable, unbreakable, if you choose to be. They reached New York as dawn broke. While Jessica's son was readmitted to the NICU, Madison confronted a new crisis. She was in labor. Too much stress, Dr. Reese said disapprovingly. Too much running around saving others when you should be resting. But Madison couldn't regret it. As contractions rolled through her, she thought about cycles broken, women saved, futures reclaimed. Luna Catherine Brooks arrived 12 hours later, 6 pounds of perfect fury, screaming her displeasure at the bright world. David cried when he held her. Helen took photos. Even Marcus smiled. In the NICU, 2 floors down, Jessica kept vigil over her son while lawyers worked to protect them both from Victoria's reaching claws. The Sterling Empire had fallen. Victoria would likely spend her remaining years in prison. Christopher faced a decade behind bars, but in 2 hospital rooms, 2 mothers held their children and chose different futures. Madison would build her foundation, help other women escape crushing dynasties. Jessica would learn to be more than what men wanted, to be what her son needed. And somewhere in federal custody, Victoria Sterling raged against the dying of her legacy, not understanding that it had been dead the moment she'd chosen cruelty over compassion, power over people. The Sterlings were finished, but the women they tried to destroy were just beginning. 6 months later, Madison sat in a federal courtroom, Luna sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had her father's sandy hair, but her mother's fierce hazel eyes, a combination that made Madison's heart ache with complex emotions. Today was Victoria Sterling's sentencing. The trial had been a media sensation. Victoria, unrepentant to the end, had treated the courtroom like her personal stage. But the evidence was overwhelming. Tax fraud, embezzlement, witness tampering, and conspiracy charges that painted a picture of decades-long criminal enterprise. "Will the defendant please rise?" Judge Morrison commanded. Victoria stood, still regal in her prison garb. At 63, federal custody had aged her a decade, but her spine remained steel straight, her expression disdainful. "Mrs. Sterling, you have been found guilty on all counts," Judge Morrison began. "The court has reviewed the evidence, the testimonies of your victims, and the pattern of behavior spanning 20 years. You show no remorse, accept no responsibility, and by your own admission, would repeat these crimes if given the chance." "I protected my family's legacy," Victoria interrupted, "something this court of peasants could never understand." Her lawyer tried to quiet her, but Victoria shook him off. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "Your legacy, Mrs. Sterling, is 3 women destroyed, children stolen from their mothers, and a corporate empire built on fraud. You speak of protecting your family while you corrupted your son and devastated countless lives." Madison shifted Luna, who stirred at the judge's raised voice. Across the aisle, she caught sight of someone unexpected. One of Victoria's previous victims, Laura Bennett, the woman whose testimony had been particularly damning. They'd connected through the Luna Foundation, and Sandra had flown in from Seattle to see justice served. "I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison," Judge Morrison announced, "with no possibility of early release." Victoria's composure finally cracked. 25 years? I'll die in there. "Then perhaps you all have the time to reflect on the lives you destroyed," the judge replied, coldly. Court is adjourned. As marshals led Victoria away, she locked eyes with Madison. The hatred there was pure poison, but underneath, Madison saw something else. Fear. Victoria Sterling, who'd ruled through intimidation for decades, was finally afraid. Outside the courthouse, Madison faced the usual media gauntlet, but this time she wasn't alone. Sandra stood with her, along with 2 other women Victoria had targeted, a united front of survival. "Ms. Brooks, how do you feel about the sentence?" a reporter called. "Justice was served," Madison said simply. "Now we focus on healing and helping others." What about Christopher Sterling's upcoming trial? Madison's expression softened slightly. Christopher made terrible choices, but he was also a victim of his mother's manipulation. I hope he uses his time in prison to become the man he never got the chance to be. That evening, Madison hosted a celebration at the Luna Foundation offices. The space hummed with purposeful energy, lawyers preparing cases, counselors meeting with clients, volunteers organizing resources. In 6 months, they'd helped over 100 women escape abusive situations. You did it, David said, bouncing Luna on his knee. Built something meaningful from something terrible. We did it, Madison corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Dad. Their reconciliation hadn't been instant or easy. 3 years of estrangement left scars. But working together to bring down the Sterlings had rebuilt their relationship on stronger foundations. David had stepped back from Nexus Security to be a full-time grandfather, and Luna had him wrapped around her tiny finger. Helen Campbell joined them, champagne in hand. Christopher's lawyer called. He wants to make a deal. Full confession in exchange for 5 years instead of 10. He should take it, Madison said. 5 years might actually give him a chance at a life afterward. You're more generous than I would be, Helen observed. Maybe, or maybe I just want Luna to know I tried to help her father, even after everything. A knock interrupted them. Marcus appeared with an unexpected visitor, Jessica Monroe, looking healthier than Madison had seen her. The past 6 months had been transformative for both of them. Sorry to interrupt, Jessica said hesitantly, but I wanted you to be the first to know. I got accepted. Accepted where? Madison asked. Columbia, bachelor's in social work. Jessica's smile was radiant. Full scholarship through the foundation you recommended. I start in the fall. Madison hugged her impulsively. Their relationship remained complicated. They'd never be friends exactly, but they'd found a mutual respect born from a shared survival. How's your son? Madison asked. Thriving. Finally hit 10 pounds. Jessica pulled out her phone, showing photos of a chubby-cheeked baby. The doctors say he'll catch up developmentally by age 2. Any word from his father? Jessica's expression hardened. He sent a check. Guilt money. I donated it to the foundation. They talked for a few more minutes before Jessica left for her night shift. She was working as a home health aide while preparing for school. Madison watched her go with mixed emotions. Jessica would never fully atone for her role in Madison's destruction, but she was trying to build something better. That had to count for something. 2 days later, Christopher's trial began. Madison attended only the first day, needing to see him one last time. He looked smaller in person than on the video link, diminished by months in Rikers in the weight of his crimes. When he took the stand for his allocution, his voice barely carried. I was weak, he said simply. I let my mother control every aspect of my life, chose her approval over my wife's love, and destroyed everything good I'd ever had. Disowned. Madison deserved better. Our daughter deserves better. I'm guilty of everything I'm charged with and more. The prosecutor pushed for the maximum sentence, but Christopher's complete cooperation and genuine remorse swayed the judge. 7 years, with possibility of parole in 5. As they led him away, Christopher looked at Madison once. She nodded. Acknowledgement, forgiveness, closure. They'd never speak again, but Luna would know her father had finally found the courage to own his failures. A month later, Madison stood before another audience, this time at a women's conference in Chicago. The organizers had asked her to speak about rebuilding after betrayal. Looking out at 500 faces, she saw her own story reflected in their eyes. They said I failed because I couldn't give them a son, Madison began, her voice carrying strongly through the auditorium. But losing everything gave me something priceless, myself. She told her story without bitterness, focusing on the lessons learned, the strength found, the future built. When she mentioned the Luna Foundation, spontaneous applause erupted. The Sterling family believed in legacy through blood, through bosso, through bullying. Madison smiled. But real legacy is the lives we touch, the cycles we break, the hope we build. My daughter will grow up knowing that her worth isn't tied to her gender or her father's name, but to the kindness she shows and the courage she finds. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, woman after woman approached with their own stories: divorces, custody battles, family betrayals. Madison listened to each one, offering resources, connections, hope. Flying back to New York, Madison found Luna awake and alert in her car seat, studying the world with serious eyes. "We did okay, didn't we, baby girl?" Madison whispered. "We're doing okay." Back home, her apartment, not her father's penthouse, but her own space bought with her divorce settlement, welcomed them with toy-strewn floors and walls covered in baby photos. It wasn't the Sterling mansion, but it was theirs. That evening, as Madison fed Luna, her phone rang. The caller ID showed the federal prison. She almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won. "Madison?" Victoria's voice sounded older, smaller. "Please don't hang up." "What do you want, Victoria?" "I'm dying." The words came baldly. "Pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe 6. Madison said nothing, processing this news. "I want to see her," Victoria continued. "My granddaughter. Once. Before. No." The word came instantly, firmly. "You have no granddaughter, Victoria. You made that choice when you threw us away." "I'm begging, like Sandra begged to see her son? Like Maria begged before she took her own life?" Madison's voice stayed calm. "You showed no mercy, Victoria. You received none. I was protecting." "Goodbye, Victoria." Madison blocked the number. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Some actions couldn't be forgiven. Victoria Sterling would die as she'd lived, alone, consumed by the legacy she'd destroyed with her own hands. Later, as Luna slept peacefully in her crib, Madison stood at the window watching Manhattan's lights twinkle. Her phone showed messages from the foundation, from women they'd helped, from partner organizations wanting to expand their work. Tomorrow she had meetings with potential donors. Next week, a court appearance for a client's custody case. Next month, the foundation's first annual gala. Life moved forward, fuller and richer than any Sterling luxury could have provided. In prison, Christopher Sterling would serve his time and perhaps emerge a better man. In another prison, Victoria Sterling would face her mortality alone, her legacy in ashes. In shelters and safe houses across the city, women would find resources and hope through the Luna Foundation. And in a modest apartment overlooking Central Park, Madison Brooks would sing her daughter to sleep with the same lullabies her own mother had sung, building a new kind of legacy, one based on love, not bloodlines, on courage, not cruelty, on lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The Sterling Empire had fallen, but from its ashes something far more precious had risen. 2 years passed like seasons changing, sometimes slowly, sometimes in a sudden rush. Luna grew from a baby into a toddler with opinions about everything and a laugh that could light up any room. The Luna Foundation expanded from 1 office to 5, helping women across 3 states. Madison was reviewing grant proposals when Helen Campbell called with unexpected news. "Victoria Sterling died this morning." Madison set down her coffee carefully. "How?" "The cancer. Apparently she lasted longer than doctors expected. Pure spite, probably." Helen paused. "There's more. She left a will." "I don't want anything from her." "You might want to hear this. She left everything to Luna." Madison nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "Her personal assets, what remains of them after legal fees, about $3 million. But there's a condition. Luna can only inherit if she takes the Sterling name." "Of course there is." Madison laughed bitterly, controlling from beyond the grave. "You can refuse on Luna's behalf." Madison thought about it as Luna played with blocks nearby, building and knocking down towers with equal enthusiasm. $3 million could do a lot of good. College funds, foundation expansion, security for the future. Set up a trust, Madison decided. The money goes to the Luna Foundation for programs helping children of incarcerated parents. And Luna keeps her name, Brooks. "Victoria would hate that," Helen said. "I know." Victoria's funeral was a sparse affair. Madison didn't attend, but Marcus provided intelligence. Only a handful of people showed, former society friends, who quickly distanced themselves when the scandals broke. Christopher wasn't permitted to attend from prison. Jessica sent flowers with a card that simply read, "It's over." The real surprise came a week later when Christopher's lawyer requested a video call. Madison almost refused, then curiosity won. Christopher appeared on her laptop screen, and Madison barely recognized him. Prison had carved away the soft edges, leaving someone leaner, more focused. His eyes held a clarity she'd never seen during their marriage. "Thank you for taking my call," he began formally. "What do you want, Chris?" "To apologize. Properly, without excuses or qualifications." He met her eyes through the camera. "I failed you as a husband, failed Luna as a father, failed myself as a man. I let my mother's poison infect everything I touched." Madison waited, sensing more. "I've been in therapy, real therapy, not the performance Mother used to arrange. I'm learning who I am without her voice in my head." He paused. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I wanted you to know I'm trying to become someone Luna wouldn't be ashamed of." "She doesn't know you exist," Madison said quietly. "I haven't decided when or how to tell her." "That's your right. I signed away mine." Christopher's voice remained steady. "But I'm writing letters. For when she's older, if you ever choose to share them, about who I really am, my failures, my hopes for her. No sterling legacy bullshit, just truth. Send them to Helen. I'll decide later." "Thank you." He started to disconnect, then paused. "Madison, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm sorry I was too weak to see it." The call ended, leaving Madison staring at a blank screen. Luna toddled over, raising her arms for a hug. "Mama sad?" "No, baby. Mama's just thinking." Madison lifted her daughter, breathing in her strawberry shampoo scent. "Want to go see Grandpa?" "Grandpa!" Luna cheered. They found David at the foundation, where he'd taken to mentoring young entrepreneurs, especially women starting businesses after leaving abusive situations. At 70, he'd found new purpose in empowering others rather than destroying enemies. "There's my girls," he beamed, immediately reaching for Luna. As they played, Madison's phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Check the news." The headline made Madison's breath catch. "Former Instagram influencer Jessica Monroe wins National Social Work Award." The article detailed Jessica's transformation from social media personality to Columbia's most dedicated social work student, graduating summa cum laude while single parenting. She'd started a program connecting foster youth with mentors, drawing on her own experiences. "I wouldn't be here without Madison Brooks," Jessica was quoted as saying. "She showed me that our worst mistakes don't have to define us, that we can choose to break cycles rather than perpetuate them." Madison smiled, remembering the desperate young woman who'd live-streamed her humiliation. People could change, given the chance and the choice. That evening, the foundation held its monthly support group. Madison usually didn't attend. The facilitators ran things beautifully. But tonight felt different. She slipped in quietly, Luna on her hip. The circle held 12 women, all at different stages of their journeys. Some newly escaped from abusive situations, others years into rebuilding. They shared stories, tears, small victories. "I got the promotion," one woman announced. "My ex said I'd never amount to anything without him. Guess he was wrong." "My daughter asked me today why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore," another shared. "I told her the truth. Age appropriate, but truth. It was hard, but freeing." Madison listened, Luna playing quietly with a stuffed elephant. These women were her true legacy, not the sterling name or fortune, but the proof that survival was possible, that thriving could follow trauma. As the meeting ended, one of the newer members approached Madison hesitantly. She was young, maybe 25, with the hollow look of someone recently escaped. "Are you Madison Brooks? The Madison Brooks?" Madison nodded. "I watched your story unfold online. The baby shower video, the trials, everything." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I was in a similar situation. Pregnant, discarded, homeless. But I remembered you, how you survived. It gave me hope to call the hotline." "You saved yourself," Madison said gently. "I just proved it was possible." "Still, thank you." As they prepared to leave, Luna pointed at the woman. "Lady Sad Mama." "Sometimes people are sad, baby, but they're also brave." "Brave good?" "Very good." Walking home through the city streets, Madison reflected on the strange turns life had taken. 3 years ago, she'd been a discarded wife sleeping in her car. Now she ran a foundation, raised a daughter, and had rebuilt her relationship with her father. The Sterlings were gone, Victoria dead, Christopher imprisoned, their empire dissolved. But the women they'd tried to destroy had risen. Her phone rang. Helen again. Madison, I just got word. Christopher's being released early. Good behavior and his cooperation with federal investigations. He'll be out next month. Madison stopped walking, processing this news. 5 years instead of 7. Yes, he'll have probation requirements, can't leave the state, has to maintain employment, but he'll be free. Does he have anywhere to go? Unknown. The Sterling properties were all seized or sold. Madison thought about the man on the video call, the clarity in his eyes, the letters he was writing for Luna. Everyone deserved a second chance, but not everyone took them. Thank him for the letters, Madison said finally, but make it clear, he's not to contact us. If Luna wants to know him someday, that's her choice, not his. Understood. That night, after Luna was asleep, Madison sat on her fire escape with a cup of tea, watching the city lights. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably studying for her master's degree. Somewhere, women were calling the Foundation's hotline, taking their first steps toward freedom. Somewhere, Christopher was counting down his final weeks in prison. And here, in a modest apartment filled with toys and love, Madison Brooks had built a life worth living. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the Foundation's social media manager. They had reached a milestone. 1,000 women helped. 1,000 women who'd escaped their own versions of the Sterling prison. 1,000 families rebuilt. 1,000 cycles broken. Madison raised her teacup to the night sky in a silent toast. To survival, to strength, to second chances seized and futures reclaimed. The Sterling legacy of cruelty had died with Victoria. But the Brooks legacy of compassion would live on through every woman who walked through the Foundation's doors. Every child who grew up knowing their worth wasn't determined by their gender. Every cycle broken by choosing kindness over control. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women seeking help, new battles to fight. But tonight, Madison Brooks sat in peace, knowing she'd won the war that mattered most, the one for her own soul, her daughter's future, and the dignity of women everywhere who'd been told they were worthless. They were wrong, they'd always been wrong, and Madison would spend the rest of her life proving it. 5 years later, Madison stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria. The Luna Foundation's annual gala had grown from a small fundraiser to the social event of the season, attended by philanthropists, celebrities, and most importantly, the women whose lives had been transformed. 5 years ago, Madison began, looking out at the sea of faces. I slept in my car, 7 months pregnant, discarded by a family that saw no value in daughters. Tonight we celebrate helping our 5,000th woman escape similar circumstances. Applause thundered through the ballroom. At the head table, David beamed with pride. Beside him sat Luna, now 7, wearing a purple dress she'd picked out herself and trying very hard to act grown up. Madison continued her speech, outlining the Foundation's expansion, shelters in 10 cities, legal aid programs, job training, child care assistance. But as she spoke, her eyes kept drifting to an unexpected figure at the back of the room. Christopher Sterling stood near the exit, clearly uncomfortable but determinedly present. He looked different, not the soft air or the broken prisoner, but something in between. He wore a simple suit, probably off the rack, and his face held lines that spoke of hard-won wisdom. They'd had no contact since his release 2 years ago. Helen reported he was working as an addiction counselor, using his gambling experience to help others. He lived quietly in Queens, avoiding any connection to his family name. Madison finished her speech to standing ovation and made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations, thanking donors. Luna stayed close, her grandfather's protective hand on her shoulder. "Mama," Luna whispered during a brief lull, "that man keeps looking at us." Madison followed her daughter's gaze to Christopher. "I see him, baby." "Do you know him?" The question she dreaded and prepared for. "Yes, would you like to get some juice while Grandpa talks to these nice people?" They slipped away to a quiet corner where Madison had arranged for juice boxes and cookies, knowing her daughter's tolerance for formal events. The man who was watching us, Madison said carefully, that's your biological father. Luna's eyes widened. She knew the basics, that her father had made bad choices and gone to prison, that he couldn't be part of their lives, but this was the first time she'd seen him. He looks sad, Luna observed with a child's directness. Maybe he is. Is he bad? He made bad choices, but people can change if they work really hard. Luna considered this while drinking her apple juice. Do I have to talk to him? Never. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. Okay, Luna seemed satisfied. Can I have another cookie? As Madison reached for the cookie tray, Helen approached with her usual impeccable timing. Christopher's asking to speak with you. Privately, I can have security escort him out. No. Madison looked at her daughter happily munching cookies. Watch Luna for 5 minutes? She found Christopher on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Up close, she could see how prison and recovery had changed him. He was leaner, his face weathered, his eyes holding depths of experience the pampered heir had never possessed. You shouldn't be here, Madison said without preamble. I know, I'm sorry, He turned to face her. I needed to see what you built, to see that something good came from all that destruction. You could have read about it online. It's not the same. Christopher's hands gripped the balcony railing. I've been in therapy for 5 years. Individual, group, every kind. And the one thing I keep coming back to is how I let my mother destroy the best thing in my life. Chris, I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance or anything. He met her eyes. I just wanted to say in person that I see it now, all of it. The manipulation, the cruelty, the way she broke people for sport, and I let it happen. Participated in it. Madison waited, sensing more. I work with addicts now, he continued. Men who've lost everything to gambling, like I almost did. And I tell them my story, how I had everything, a beautiful wife, a daughter on the way, wealth, privilege, and I threw it all away for the approval of someone incapable of love. Does it help, the work? Some days. When someone calls to say they've been clean for 6 months, or they reconciled with their family. He smiled sadly. I'll never reconcile with mine. I know that. But maybe I can stop other men from making my mistakes. They stood in silence for a moment, the city humming below them. She's beautiful, Christopher said quietly. Luna, she looks like you. She has your hair. Lucky her. Everything else from you is better. He straightened. I should go. I just wanted you to know what you've built here, it matters. You took the worst thing that Porter happened to you and turned it into salvation for thousands. That's heroic. As he turned to leave, Madison made a decision that surprised her. Chris, wait. She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo. This is from her birthday last month. She's obsessed with dinosaurs right now. Christopher's face transformed as he looked at the image of Luna wearing a T-Rex costume, roaring at the camera. She's perfect. She is. Madison put the phone away. I'm not saying you can meet her, but Helen has your letters. I've been saving them. When she's older, if she wants to know you, I won't stand in the way. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve. It's about what she might need. Madison studied him. Keep doing the work, Chris. Become someone she'd be proud to know. Every day, he promised. That's what I work toward every day. He left then, walking back through the ballroom without looking back. Madison watched him go, feeling an unexpected peace. The man who'd betrayed her was gone, replaced by someone trying to earn redemption. Whether he'd succeed remained to be seen, but the effort mattered. Returning to the party, Madison found Luna teaching David a complicated hand-clapping game, while Helen looked on with amusement. Everything okay? Helen asked quietly. Everything's fine, Madison said, meaning it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of success. They raised $3 million for the foundation. Laura Bennett announced she was running for Seattle City Council on a platform of supporting abuse survivors. Jessica Monroe, now a licensed social worker, received an award for her foster youth program. As the evening wound down, Madison found herself in quiet conversation with a newer board member, a tech executive named James who'd been consistently supportive without being pushy. Hell of a speech, James said. You've built something remarkable here. We've built it, Madison corrected. None of this happens alone. Still, the vision was yours. He paused. I was wondering, and please feel free to say no, if you might like to have dinner sometime, somewhere less formal than this. Madison felt a flutter of something she'd thought dead. Interest, possibility, hope for personal happiness, beyond motherhood and work. I have a 7-year-old daughter, she said. My life is complicated. I have a 9-year-old son, divorce. I understand complicated. James smiled. Just dinner, no pressure. Okay, Madison heard herself say. Dinner. As the evening ended and Madison helped Luna into her coat, her daughter looked up with those serious hazel eyes. Mama, are you happy? Madison knelt to Luna's level. Why do you ask, baby? Sarah at school says her mom is sad since her dad left. I don't want you to be sad. Oh, sweetheart. Madison hugged her daughter tight. I'm not sad. I have you and Grandpa and work I love and so many friends. I'm very, very happy. Good, Luna pulled back. Can we get ice cream on the way home? It's past your bedtime. But it's a special night, Madison laughed. Okay, one scoop. As they left the hotel, David carrying a sleepy Luna, Madison looked back at the ballroom where hundreds had gathered to support women escaping terrible situations. 5 years ago, she'd been one of them, desperate, alone, afraid. Now she was the one offering hope. In prison, Victoria Sterling had died believing the world valued only bloodlines and male heirs. She'd been wrong. The world valued courage, compassion, and the willingness to transform pain into purpose. Outside, Manhattan glittered with promise. Luna dozed on David's shoulder, chocolate ice cream evidence on her chin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, women to help, funds to raise, a possible date to navigate. But tonight, Madison Brooks walked through the city that had once seemed so hostile and felt nothing but gratitude. She'd lost a marriage but gained a mission, lost a family name but found her true identity, lost the life she'd planned but discovered the life she was meant to live. The Sterling legacy had crumbled to dust, but the Brooks legacy, one of resilience, redemption, and revolution, would echo through generations of women who learned they were worth more than any man's approval or family's acceptance. As they reached home, Luna stirred. Mama? Yes, baby? Love you to the moon. And back, sweetheart. Always and back. Inside their apartment, Madison tucked her daughter into bed, kissed her father goodnight, and stood at her window looking out at the city that never slept. Somewhere a woman was calling their hotline. Somewhere a mother was planning her escape. Somewhere a daughter was learning her worth. Madison Brooks had been kicked out for having no son, but she'd gained something infinitely more valuable. A daughter who'd grow up knowing her worth, a purpose that saved lives, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we can do for others. The mistress who'd laughed was now a social worker helping others. The CEO father who'd destroyed them had become a grandfather building futures. The weak husband was finding strength in service. And Madison? Madison was exactly where she belonged. Not as a Sterling wife trapped in a golden cage, but as a Brooks woman free to soar. The story that began with humiliation had become a testament to hope, and this was only the beginning.